3 true home invasions, bone-chilling tales that will haunt you forever. The door creaked open. A quiet house, or so it seemed. Inside, shadows danced like whispers, lurking in every corner. Those who dared to look deeper would feel an icy grip around their hearts. 3 true stories, each more horrifying than the last. Families shattered. Lives altered forever. What happens when the true danger hides behind the walls of your own home? In the dead of night, Deborah awoke to a strange sound. A shuffle. Just a few feet away from her bed. The chill crept up her spine, fueling a primal instinct to freeze. Her husband, sound asleep beside her, remained blissfully unaware. She squinted into the dark, her breath caught in her throat. Was that movement? Absurd thoughts raced through her mind, drowning in fear. Adrenaline shot through her, heart thumping wildly against her ribs. Suddenly, the figure stepped into the dim light. A man, cloaked in shadows, stood only inches away. His eyes, black pits of malice, glinted in the moonlight. Then there was the Krieger family. They thought they were safe, locked within a fortress of comfort. But one night, a crack through the basement door shattered their peace. To the children, it was just a game, giggles echoing through the hallways. But their laughter morphed into screams, slicing through the air as an unseen intruder emerged from the dark depths, eyes fiery and wild. He wasn't just any thief, he was a predator, stalking the very shadows they thought protected them. The terror gripped their throats like a vice, squeezing out their screams in a rush of sheer panic. In a final tale, young Melissa returned home after a late shift. The sun dipped below the horizon as she trudged up her driveway. Exhausted, she dragged her keys, the jingle barely masking her fear. The familiar feeling of being watched crawled over her skin. As she approached her door, it swung open, and chills raced down her spine. There stood her roommate, face frozen in terror. "He's in here," she gasped, pointing at the living room. The air felt electrified, heavy with the weight of her words. What had they invited into their home? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. What happened next? Would Deborah survive her brush with death, or was the darkness just beginning? Could the Krieger family band together in their darkest hour? And what lay in wait for Melissa, lurking just behind the shadows of her home? Each tale promised more horror than the last, like an open door inviting dread within. What mysteries would unfold next? Deborah's heart thundered in her chest as the figure loomed closer. She wanted to scream, to wake her husband, to do anything but remain paralyzed in fear. But her voice felt stolen, trapped in her throat, heavy like lead. The man's presence felt suffocating, each breath she took tightening the noose of terror around her. He stepped into the dim light filtering through the window, revealing a face twisted into a grotesque mask of hunger and madness. Unkempt hair fell over his brow, and his clothes hung from his frame like tattered remnants of a lost soul. There was a sickening glint in his eye that promised her nightmares would soon become reality. With a sudden burst of instinct, Deborah's hand shot out and grabbed her husband's arm, shaking him awake. "Ryan! Wake up!" Her voice broke the silence, filled with an edge of desperation that sliced through the stillness. Ryan stirred, his eyes bleary with sleep. Confusion flickered across his face as he tried to understand the fear swirling around her. "What? Deb, what's wrong?" But before she could answer, the intruder lunged forward. The collision sent both Ryan and Deborah tumbling off the bed with gasps of shock, the air thick with panic. Ryan rolled to the side, instinctively putting himself between Deborah and the dark man. The intruder grinned a twisted smile that revealed teeth like broken glass. "You were making too much noise," he said, his voice a low, cruel whisper that echoed menacingly in the small room. Just then, The faint thud of footsteps echoed from the basement in the Krieger household. The children had been put to bed hours ago, their dreams now interrupted by a presence lurking all too close. Each thud sent a jolt through the veins of Henry Krieger, who stood frozen at the foot of the basement stairs, dread flooding his senses. He turned to Martha, his wife, who clutched their youngest tightly to her chest, eyes wide in disbelief. "Did you hear that?" he asked, barely above a whisper. She nodded, her face pale as she instinctively pressed her child closer. "Get the kids!" Henry barked, his voice suddenly fierce. He took a step towards the basement, every muscle in his body taut with fear and protectiveness. But striking shadows danced at the bottom of the stairs, a black void waiting to devour him whole. Meanwhile, young Melissa, heart racing, faced an empty living room. "What do you mean, he's in here?" she shouted, panic clawing at her throat. Her roommate Claire pressed herself against the frame of the door, tears streaming down her face. He was right behind me," Claire sobbed, wringing her hands. "I thought I lost him. He could still be here." With trembling hands, Melissa reached for her phone, hoping to dial for help. The screen flickered to life, illuminating her face, but the shadows remained. They twisted and turned, cloaking the room, revealing nothing but suffocating silence. In that moment, thoughts raced through her mind. Was it really a monster she was facing? Or the darkest parts of their own lives manifesting within those walls? Fear was palpable, thickening the air like a fog that refused to clear. Back in Deborah's home, the intruder took a step closer, and Ryan readied himself for the inevitable confrontation, when suddenly, just as the tension reached its peak, the door behind him swung open. It creaked loudly, a loud interruption that shattered the charged atmosphere, and a figure loomed in the threshold, silhouetted against the dim light. A chill shivered through the room as Ryan's eyes darted between the shadow at the door and the monster before him. Who or what had just walked in? What had they all awakened? What horror lay in wait beyond the threshold? The air trembled as the true nightmare began to reveal itself. The figure at the door stepped closer, revealing only a dark silhouette, dripping in tint. The air felt as thick as molasses, slipping between Deborah's fingers as she fought to understand who or what it was. "Who are you?" Ryan's voice cut through the tension, laced with a tremor he couldn't hide. He clenched his fists, muscles coiled like a snake prepared to strike. The stranger paused, scanning the room with eyes that seemed to bore into Ryan's soul. "Just a friend or perhaps a foe," he replied, his voice dripping with mockery. It was the kind of voice that turned skin to ice, and a chill swept through Deborah despite the oppressive heat of fear. Deborah grabbed Ryan's arm, the need to shield him overtaking her instinct to flee. "No! Don't engage!" she whispered, her words collapsing under a weight that threatened to choke her. But Ryan didn't back down. "You can't just don't you dare raise your voice." The intruder's eyes flared, their gleam igniting rage. He lunged forward, barely missing Ryan as the man swerved to the side. "Get the kids!" Henry's voice rang through the house, an echo of desperate urgency that reached them from a distance. They weren't alone, their fates were intertwined, creeping towards something darker together. Just then, footsteps echoed from the basement, heavier and more deliberate. It felt like the floor was alive, shifting beneath Henry's feet, each thud an omen of what was to come. With grim determination, he pressed down those thoughts. This was not the time to flinch. "Martha, stay here!" he ordered, but in doing so, he risked everything for the sake of bravado. He stepped forward into the darkness, a beacon of shaky courage thrusting against the shadows, each step weighted by fear. Upstairs, Deborah struggled to keep her anxiety at bay. "What do you want?" she shouted, daring to challenge the monster in her home. The intruder chuckled, an unsettling sound that twisted like a vine around her mind. "Want? Oh, I want everything." He lunged, but this time Ryan met him head-on, the two of them crashing into a nearby dresser, sending wooden drawers sprawling across the floor like lost souls. Deborah's scream echoed off the walls, and time stretched out. It felt like an eternity was held captive in that single moment. In the other room, Melissa gripped her phone, her heart racing faster than the numbers dialing. "Please pick up. Please! But all she got was silence, thick and suffocating. Claire's panic rose like a tidal wave. We need to get out, she urged, eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, a noise louder than before came from the hallway. It was heavy, deliberate, approaching them like a nightmarish freight train. In just one blink, the atmosphere morphed into chaos. Melissa turned to Claire, voice trembling. Do you hear that? We're not safe here. Then her phone slipped from her grasp, the screen cracking against the wood floor. Panic surged between them, binding their movements in a desperate dance of survival. What if Claire's voice wavered, cutting off as the door slammed open, revealing a taller figure cloaked in darkness, an echo of their fears? Back upstairs, Ryan and the intruder struggled, but Ryan's resolve began to falter. What had they awakened? Who else was there, watching through the fractured lens of reality? Then another silhouette appeared in the doorway, the original figure from the threshold, stepping into the fray, the shadows clinging to him like second skin. What are you doing, friend? It asked. You're going to ruin my fun. The air thickened again, and Deborah felt her heart flop in her chest. Who were these people? And why did it feel like they were all tied together in some gruesome game? As their eyes locked, a haunting truth began to surge. Every moment had been leading them to this very intersection of horror. What would they have to sacrifice to escape? Or was it already too late? The chaos erupted like a thunderstorm. Ryan and the intruder crashed against the dresser, sending a cacophony of splintered wood and forgotten memories into the air. The unfamiliar bedroom space morphed into a battlefield, each sound resonating like the beat of a drum signaling war. Deborah's body tensed, her heart racing as she darted a glance at the two looming figures. Her instinct screamed for her to flee, but her feet fell rooted to the floor. Ryan! She shouted, desperation lining her words. Get away from him! The intruder twisted, a sinister grin painting his features as he shoved Ryan back, forcing him against the wall. Deborah's breath caught in her throat. She could see the wild fury in Ryan's eyes, fighting back the panic. The room constricted around them, a vice slowly squeezing tighter. How entertaining! The intruder sneered. I almost didn't think you had it in you, Ryan. As he spoke, the second silhouette stepped forward, revealing a familiar yet chilling face, someone they thought they'd never see again. But I'm here to claim what's mine. Mika? Ryan's voice trembled, thrown off balance by shock. What are you doing here? I came to finish what we started, she said, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying excitement, a hint of madness peering through. You think you can just leave this behind? I know all your secrets. Henry stalled halfway in the hallway, the weight of the moment crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Mika, stop. You don't have to do this. He pleaded, but the words felt fragile, as if they might shatter upon impact. What secrets? What history had tied them all in this dark web of fear? Meanwhile, downstairs, Claire and Melissa huddled by the staircase, trying to make sense of the growing danger as that heavier presence approached. The air vibrated with an electric tension. Melissa felt the hairs rise on her arms, her instincts screaming that whatever was coming was worse than they had faced so far. The door. We need to lock it, Claire exclaimed, fear gripping her voice like a vice. They raced for the front entrance, their shadows flickering against the walls as they sprinted. The sound of heavy footsteps thudded, growing closer and closer, fueling their urgency. Go! Go! Melissa urged, her heart pounding fiercely. She turned just as another figure emerged from the darkness, an imposing silhouette that dwarfed the others, a creature almost too undefined to comprehend. Staring at them with glowing red eyes, it seemed more monster than man. Back upstairs, Ryan withdrew from the fight for a moment, his mind racing. Mika, we can talk. This isn't the way. But betrayal hung heavily in the air as she laughed softly, a chilling sound laced with darkness. Talk? You think words can fix this? She taunted, her stance growing confident as the shadows wrapped around her tighter. You brought this upon yourself by leaving. You don't have to do this. He shouted again, but the sincerity faltered under the weight of her anger. Who would be thought? She said, drawing closer. Ryan the hero, Ryan the coward? You just ran away while I was left to pick up the pieces. Deborah stepped between them and the twisted history she feared. Stop! You were our friend, she yelled, her voice breaking as emotion overwhelmed her. That's the thing, isn't it? Mika leaned in closer, a devilish smile curling her lips. Friends turn into enemies when the truth is revealed. Isn't that right, Deborah? The house seemed to tremble around them, echoes of their troubled past colliding with the present moment. Outside, the wind howled, a foreboding warning as shadows danced in synchronization with the growing chaos, saturating the air with impending doom. Just then, a loud crash sounded from the basement. The ground shook as something heavy and powerful began to rise, a dark promise of terror waiting to be unleashed. Run! Deborah screamed as the shadows conspired against them. But would escape mean freedom, or simply delay a confrontation that was destined to shatter them all? The walls of truth were closing in, and choices would need to be made. Would they face their past, or allow it to consume them whole? Deborah's panic surged, overwhelming her senses as she grabbed Ryan's arm and pulled him back. We have to get out of here. Her voice trembled with dread. Ryan hesitated, still reeling from Mika's betrayal, but the urgency in Deborah's grip rekindled his resolve. Leave this to me, Deb, he finally said, his voice low but firm. He turned towards Mika, the fire of determination igniting in his chest. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. Mika's laughter echoed, chilling and mocking, her eyes flashing with manic energy. Another way? How naive you are, Ryan. Your secrets are buried deep, and I've come to dig them up one way or another. Her image flickered within the shadows like a phantom, both familiar and foreign. A sudden crash from the basement interrupted their confrontation. The floor shook violently as a heavy thud reverberated through the walls, drawing everyone's attention. Shadows pulled at the door, twisting like animated tendrils hungry for freedom, and an ominous growl filled the air. Something ancient was awakening below. Ryan, we can't wait. Deborah pushed, urgency raw in her voice. The air hummed with tension, and fear twisted in the pit of her stomach. We have to get out. Now! Before Ryan could respond, the intruder lunged at him, fury propelling him forward. A fist connected with Ryan's jaw, sending him staggering backward. Run, Ryan! Deborah shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. She felt a surge of adrenaline, her own anger igniting the terror that threatened to overcome her. Ryan shook his head and slammed his fist into the intruder's side, but it barely fazed him. Why are you doing this? Ryan grunted, lungs burning, eyeing Mika, who watched with a sadistic glee. Because you deserve it, Ryan. You think you can just erase the past? You left me to suffer. You turned your back, and now I'll make you pay. As Deborah scooted back to grab a heavy lamp, she spotted the shadow at the basement door creeping higher, its form shifting unsettlingly. The shadows writhed, each pulse sending another shiver down her spine. Would whatever lay beneath swallow them whole? Deborah, now! Ryan yelled as he launched himself toward Mika, but she sidestepped him effortlessly, her grin widening. Chaos erupted as the intruder retaliated, throwing Ryan against the dresser again. In that moment, the basement cracked open, a resounding roar echoing as the darkness surged forth like a tidal wave. Claire and Melissa's frantic whispers ricocheted in Deborah's mind as she sensed their shared horror below. The imposing silhouette that had made its way from the shadows was drawing closer, tall, dark, and monstrous. It filled the space, filling the house with an unimaginable dread. Everything froze. Fear blanketed them like a shroud, the air thick and stifling. Get back! Ryan shouted, eyes darting between Mika and the new terror. But it was too late. The weight of the moment pressed down on them, paralyzing, as the creature lunged forward. The room cracked with noise, furniture clattering, and the walls trembled. Adrenaline coursed through Deborah's veins as she grabbed hold of Ryan and yanked him toward the door. We can't stay. We have to fight through. But as they turned to flee, a guttural growl resonated, shaking the ground beneath them. In that instant, a truth lanced through Deborah like lightning. Whatever darkness had festered below was not just coming for them, it had become them. As the house echoed with chaos, the confrontation of their past caught up to them. They were trapped, bound to a history that threatened to consume them whole. Would they be able to face the monsters of their past and the darkness awakening in the shadows, or would they fall victim to both? A shattering scream erupted from downstairs as the creature surged forth, piercing the veil between their fear and survival. Deborah's heart raced, and with every ounce of courage left, she took a breath. "We fight together!" she cried, determination hardening her voice. But even as she rallied for battle, the shadows around them thickened, promising secrets and pain yet to be revealed. The confrontation had only just begun. Panic surged through Deborah as the creature's presence filled the room, its growl drowning out her thoughts. She clutched Ryan's hand tightly, her pulse racing in her ears. "We have to move!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The thick air stifled her breaths, turning urgency into desperation. Ryan's eyes were wide, reflecting the terror that coursed between them. "Where?" he gasped, his attention bouncing between the monstrous silhouette and Mika, who stood grinning in her sick satisfaction. The flickering light cast shadows that danced wildly, creating a nightmarish spectacle where reality twisted and contorted. "Back to the basement," Deborah called out, her instinct kicking in. "We can barricade it." They both turned, adrenaline driving their muscles, but the shadow had other plans. It lunged, sending a wave of malice that nearly knocked them off their feet. In that moment, the room erupted into chaos. Debris flew as the creature's claws raked through furniture, throwing splinters like confetti in the storm of fear. Ryan dropped the lamp meant for defense, the sound echoing with finality. "Run!" Deborah screamed, pulling him with her as they darted for the hallway. They could hear Mika cackling behind them, the sound sharper than glass against their frayed nerves. "You think hiding will save you?" A horrible thought slashed through Deborah's mind. Hiding wouldn't save them, it hadn't protected them from their past. She squeezed Ryan's hand tighter. There had to be a way out, but every turn felt like another trap, every corner harboring another nightmare. They barreled down the stairs, the swarm of shadows swirling threateningly at their heels. Deborah turned and caught a glimpse of the creature. Its eyes glowed like embers in an eternal night, reflecting both hunger and fury. She felt a chill creep up her spine. This was no ordinary thing. This was a piece of their own darkness, a consequence of choices made long ago. "Deb, we can't." "They're right there," Ryan shouted, pointing to the basement door that barely hung on its hinges, soon to buckle under the weight of what lay beneath. But there was nowhere else to go. The walls were closing in, echoing their frantic thoughts as new screams rose from below, a chorus of horrors mingling with the dark. "Okay. I'll hold it." She turned again, prepared to make a stand. But Mika laughed derisively, pushing through the fading light as she approached Ryan, her intentions cloaked in malice. "Are you really willing to sacrifice yourself for someone who abandoned you?" Mika taunted, her breath low and venomous. "You think hiding will purge your sins, Ryan? The truth is you are what you fear." Deborah's heart hammered. Shadows pressed against her. "Don't listen to her," she pleaded, feeling the room spin with doubts and betrayals. "Mika is just trying to manipulate you." With a roar, the creature surged forward, its form shifting between reality and nightmare. It lunged toward them, but instinct kicked in. Deborah pushed Ryan behind her just as she grabbed a chair, swinging it wildly at the creature, the wood splintering in a cacophony of shouts and fury. Yet, the impact barely registered. The creature roared, unfazed, and with each breath, it felt closer to consuming them both. They were in deep now, caught in a battle not just for survival, but for the very essence of who they were. "Get back!" Ryan shouted, his own fear giving him courage as he stood beside her, ready to fight. The glow in his eyes started to match the fire in hers, but the shadows whispered old fears and regrets, sucking the strength from their resolve. "Help us!" Deborah cried out, but even as she did, uncertainty wrapped around her heart like a vice. Could they truly face what hunted them? Or would the darkness between memories tear them apart once and for all, Before the shadows entwined them fully, she felt one more surge of determination. "We fight together," she echoed. But as they prepared to stand firm against the encroaching nightmare, a sudden silence roared through the room, freezing the confrontation in its tracks. The creature paused, as if sensing something deeper than their fear. And then, unmistakably, it lurched back, merging with the shadows and retreating into darkness, leaving their hearts racing in the void of silence. "What was that?" Ryan gasped, both loss and confusion battling in his expression. Deborah's breath fogged the air as she stared into the depths of the shadows that pulsed like a living heartbeat. "I don't know," she whispered, fear mingling with intrigue. "But whatever it is, it feels like it's just the beginning." When the silence shattered once more, it brought not just fear but newfound questions. What else awaited them beneath the surface? What truths lay hidden and twisted within their past, ready to claw its way back to light? As their eyes adjusted to the dark, Deborah had a sinking feeling that much worse was still to come. The air crackled, vibrating with anticipation, as Deborah and Ryan stood frozen in uncertainty. The darkness around them pulsed like a living thing, and the silence felt heavy, almost sentient. Was the creature gone? Or was it merely waiting in the shadows, ready to pounce once more? Deborah strained her ears, listening for any sound that could betray the creature's presence. "We can't just stand here," she said, her throat tight from panic. "We need to find something, anything to protect ourselves." Ryan nodded, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his fear. "What about that toolbox from the shed?" He took a tentative step back towards the stairs, glancing over his shoulder. "It has tools we could use." "No! We can't split up." Deborah's voice sliced through the air with desperation. "What if it comes back? We won't be safe here either." Ryan shot back, an urgency seeping into his words. Anxiety flickered in his eyes, but beneath it lay an ember of determination. They both knew they needed to regroup and think clearly. "Let me go, and I promise to be quick." Deborah felt a choke in her throat, knowing Ryan was only trying to help, but the fear of losing him surged through her like wildfire. Okay, fine. Just be careful." Reluctantly, she released his hand. As he darted up the stairs, she scanned their surroundings, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. The shadows were thick, wrapping around her like a shroud. She took a step back, pressing against the cool wall, yearning for the light to return, for the creature to be nothing more than a figment of their imagination. Her gaze flicked towards Mika, who still lingered in the doorway, that wicked grin plastered on her face. "What do you want with us?" Deborah shouted, anger bubbling in her chest. "You did this. You're the reason we're in this mess." Mika shrugged, her expression as tainted as the darkness creeping closer. "I merely facilitated your reunion with your past. It's not my fault you can't confront your own demons." "Demons?" The term hit Deborah hard. Was that what it was? A manifestation of their fears? Could they truly fight something that was born from within? Suddenly, a loud clatter broke her thoughts, Ryan returning with a battered toolbox. He held it up like a shield, but the hope quickly faded as he saw the shadows dance around them. "Deb! We've got to get out of here now." Before they could react, a piercing shriek erupted from the abyss, echoing through the basement like a death knell. The creature lunged from the darkness, its form now so close that Deborah could smell the rot that came off it. Raw fear gripped her, and she instinctively grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him toward the rickety stairs. "Go!" she shouted. They scrambled backward, hearts pounding furiously in their chests. The creature's hideous snarl sent chills racing down her spine as it closed the gap with monstrous speed. "Think! What do we do?" Ryan's breath was shallow, panic rippling through his voice. "I don't know," she shot back, each word laced with terror. "We need light. Maybe the window's over there," Ryan shouted, pointing to a small, cracked window near the ceiling. Desperation quickened their pace as they dashed toward it, the toolbox thumping against Ryan's side while the creature thrashed behind them, its claws ripping through the air. Deborah leaped onto a nearby crate, reaching for the window. With trembling fingers, she struggled to wrench it open, every second stretching impossibly. The glass resisted, and in the distance, the monster's guttural growl grew closer. "Ryan, help!" she cried, the urgency bursting from her lungs. He jumped up with her, forcing his hands against the window. Together, they pushed until it creaked open, releasing a gust of stale air that tasted of dust and desperation. "Now!" Ryan shouted, hoisting her up to the opening. As she squeezed through, the creature's roar above them sent shockwaves through the basement. "Come on, come on!" she urged, reaching back for him, her heart a pounding drum in her chest. But as Ryan climbed after her, his foot slipped. Time felt suspended in horror as she watched him tumble backward, his scream mingling with the darkness. "No!" Deborah screamed, feeling as if the world was collapsing around her. Just then, the shadows shifted. A wave of energy surged through her. The creature was coming, and it was furious. With a last desperate glance, she pulled herself through the window and tumbled onto the cold, hard ground outside. She hit the earth hard, panic seizing her as she looked back into the basement. Ryan hadn't made it out. Staring into the dark maw of the basement, the echo of the creature's growl radiated through her, a chilling promise of what was still to come. "Ryan!" she shouted, tears blurring her vision. Silence. And then she realized, the darkness was shifting again. Something was pushing its way through the shadows, something far worse than she ever anticipated. What had they truly unleashed? As her stomach turned with dread, she knew this was only the beginning. Deborah's heart raced as the shadows swirled and coiled, forming shapes that seemed almost sentient. The window's opening was just behind her, but she could feel the air thicken with an unspeakable dread. She could hardly breathe, the weight of her fear crushing her. The creature's menacing growl echoed again, sharper now, vibrating in her bones. It meant to hunt. It was no longer just a figment of their fears, it was a reality. She darted away from the window, backing into the unforgiving darkness outside. Deb's mind raced, desperately seeking a plan. Where was Ryan? She could still picture him, smiling, faces painted by the warm sun during long summer days. And now he was lost to her, swallowed by the shadows. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself, rubbing her arms in a futile attempt to ward off the chill creeping through her. Turning, she sprinted toward the tree line that edged their property, hoping to find shelter instead of remaining exposed. The night air was oppressive, it stank of decay, and something else entirely sinister. Instinctively, she pressed her back against the rough bark of a towering oak, closing her eyes for just a moment to gather herself. But the image of Ryan falling echoed in her mind. If only she had reached out further, pulled harder, squeezed tightly against the tree, she steeled her thoughts. She couldn't lose him, not like this. Deb needed to confront the darkness, not only to save Ryan, but to finally put this nightmare to rest. So what did that mean? As if punctuating her thoughts, a rustle came from the edge of the woods. The stillness shattered, and she squinted, squirming to see through the haze. Was that an echo of Ryan's voice? Instinct clawed away at her, urging her to move toward it. But with each step she took, the invisible ropes of fear tightened around her throat. "Ryan!" she called, her voice a mere whisper against the howling wind. There was no answer. Only the relentless cacophony of silence. Then, she saw a faint shimmer of light flickering between the trees. A lantern? Hope surged within her, scattering the shadows momentarily. With trembling legs, she made her way toward it. The flicker turned into a blaze as she stepped closer, illuminating the twisted branches that surrounded her, and that's when she saw them. Figures. Silhouetted against the flames, they lurked just beyond the glow, their forms shifting. They were not human. She could feel it in her bones, they exuded malice. "Run!" Her own voice cracked through the night, a panic-driven scream tearing from her lips. Without thinking, she turned, sprinting back to the house, but as she tore through the trees, she felt hands icy, clammy fingers grazed her arm. Startled, she stumbled, only to find herself in the grip of shadows, yanking her back. "Let go!" Deborah clawed at the air, pulling her arm fiercely to escape. The darkness slithered away, hissing its displeasure. Her pulse hammered. The cacophony of her heartbeat drowned out the sound of whatever tried to drag her down. Then, in the corner of her eye, she saw it. A movement. The basement window, still ajar. There was light pooling faintly from within, the faintest glimmer of hope that drew her closer. "Ryan, I'm coming!" she gasped, her voice hoarse as she pushed onward toward the house. Sweat mixing with tears streamed down her cheeks. As she lunged forward, the shadows surged around her. She could hear muffled whispers, pleading voices rising from the abyss that swamped her whole being. The front door creaked open, and there it was, the roof of the darkness spilling over the ground. Something within its depths laughed, a wicked, chilling sound that sent ice through her veins. What had she awakened? She had meant to face her fears, but now they were tangible entities, tormenting her from the depths. As she stepped back, a claw breached the threshold of the light, grotesque and enormous. It reached towards her with deliberate slowness, leaving behind a wake of dread. Breath hitching, she wondered, was it only the beginning of horrifying truths? Was Ryan truly gone, or was he hidden somewhere in that encroaching darkness? Desperate to find out, she bit the inside of her cheek and took one bold step forward as the shadows beckoned. What waited for her on the other side? Deborah's heart felt like it might burst as the claw twisted through the air, a grotesque shadow reaching for her. She had no idea what lay beyond, just a whisper of light luring her closer. The thought of Ryan pulled her with a magnetic force she couldn't ignore. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to find some safety in the oppressive darkness just outside the reach of the light. But with each passing second, the creature seemed to grow bolder, its claw poised like a predator ready to pounce. "Think, Deb, think," she urged herself, voice shaking. There had to be a way to fight it, to find Ryan, to save them both. The cold terror that had paralyzed her shifted into fiery determination. She couldn't let the shadows claim him. With a surge of adrenaline, she stepped forward, one careful foot after the other, into the wavering glow. The laughter from the creature was a sick parody of amusement that reverberated in her bones. It knew her fear. "Ryan!" she cried again, her voice echoing a desperate plea that bounced off the walls of despair. "Where are you?" The shadows quivered, almost as if they were answering her call. Chilling breaths snaked around her, caressing her skin, creating a miasma of dread. But then, a faint reply pierced the dark. Deborah, it was him. Just a whisper, but she felt it in her core, a beacon through the black. "Ryan!" She pushed deeper into the gloom, the light flickering dangerously as she did. The shadows hissed with ire, swarming her limbs, clutching tightly as if trying to boil her resolve. But the sound of Ryan's voice imbued her with courage. The basement door loomed nearby, gaping open and beckoning her with ominous intent. If she could only reach it, she could unearth whatever lay hidden within. Compelled by urgency, she sprinted toward it, the light sputtering behind her. Whispers intensified, those demonic sounds becoming a frenzy, clamoring over one another, urging her to halt. Then, an icy grip latched onto her ankle, yanking her to the ground with brutal force. Pain burst through her as she landed hard. "Get off me!" she screamed, flailing, clawing against the unseen assailant. The shadows darkened further, pouring over her as she kicked violently, her heart pounding a staccato rhythm of terror. "Deborah, please help!" The echoes of Ryan's voice faded, swallowed by the sinister laughter that encapsulated her. Gritting her teeth, Deb rolled onto her back, her eyes scanning the suffocating darkness above her. The creature shifted, revealing a face twisted in malevolence, eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger. Its breath reeked of rot, hot and rancid. "No!" she shouted, refusing to cower. With everything she had left, she reached for a jagged piece of wood on the ground, the dislodged remains of a broken garden stake. Clenching it tightly, she hurled herself to her feet, facing the nightmarish figure. "Get away from him!" she demanded, brandishing the makeshift weapon. The shadows hissed in outrage, the laughter turning to shrieks as they recoiled. Courage surged through her. She could push back. But as she lunged forward, plunging the stake toward the creature, the darkness folded in on itself, swirling around her in a cyclone of chaos. The light behind her flickered one last time before it vanished entirely, leaving her engulfed in an abyss of shadow, then silence. Just as she felt her resolve slipping, a brilliant flicker of light erupted from the center of the darkness. Words formed in her mind, a chant tugging at her instincts, an incantation she hadn't known she possessed. "Ryan, I'm coming," she breathed, unaware of the horrors still waiting, ready to answer her call. What lay ahead, in that building darkness? Would she uncover a truth more terrifying than the shadows themselves? Deborah's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she stood, engulfed in the suffocating dark. The flicker of light had shown her a path, a way through the chaos, spark igniting her resolve. "Ryan! I'm coming!" she shouted into the shadows, her voice fierce and defiant. As if responding to her call, the darkness pulsed faster, coils of shadow rushing towards her. The creature loomed just out of reach, eyes glowing with hunger, but she was no longer afraid. A rush of heat filled her. She could fight this. With the jagged piece of wood still gripped tightly in her palm, Deborah charged forward into the void, her feet pounding against the ground. She would not be consumed by the nightmares anymore. "Remember who you are," she yelled, channeling her fear into strength. "Ryan believes in you." The whispers of past burdens swirled around her, taunting her with reminders of inadequacy, but she pushed through. "No! I am not defined by you." Suddenly, Ryan's voice echoed back, ricocheting off the walls of despair. "Deb! Please!" His voice was strained, filled with desperation. It made her blood run cold and fueled her determination. Dodging the tendrils of darkness that clawed at her, she caught a glimpse of him, a shadowy outline in the abyss. He was struggling to break free from the creature's grip, his face twisted in pain. "Hold on!" she shouted, her heart swelling with desperation. "I'm almost there." The faint glow she had seen earlier pulsed in response, guiding her onward. Deborah slammed her shoulder against an unseen barrier, knowing she had to get past it. It felt as if walls of memories and regrets held her back, but she wouldn't falter. With all her might, she spun around, driving the stake into what she believed to be the heart of her torment, every painful memory, every missed moment, every lingering fear. She thrust it forward, shouting, "Let him go! Let us go!" The darkness shrieked, a cacophony of rage as the creature recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. Its eyes, those terrible, glowing eyes, filled with uncertainty. And in that moment of hesitance, she took aim and drove the stake deeper, thrusting her voice into the void. "You don't own us. You can't control us anymore." A shockwave erupted, illuminating the shadows, forcing them to retreat. The ground trembled beneath her, and she felt the grip of fear release its hold as light flooded the room, engulfing everything in warmth and hope. "Ryan!" she cried out, joy threading through her panic. "Deb!" His voice rang clearer now. He was fighting back. She pushed through the receding darkness and emerged into a glowing space, her spirit lifting as she locked eyes with him. With one final blow, the darkness fractured, releasing Ryan from its suffocating grasp. He surged forward, arms wide, and awaited her embrace. They collided, a rush of relief washing over them as light fused their beings together. "I thought I lost you," Deborah breathed, cupping Ryan's face, reading the fear in his eyes that had just begun to fade. "We'll face this together, Deb." "Always," he promised, determination setting his features. With renewed strength, they turned to face what remained of the creature. The darkness writhed and lashed out, but as they stood united, it receded, shadows shattering, their past dissipating into mere echoes. The weight of their fears once chained to them transformed into fragments of light. "Are you ready?" Deborah asked, squeezing Ryan's hand, heart racing for a different reason now, surrounded not by terror but by hope. "More than ever," he replied with fierce belief mirrored in his gaze. Together, they stepped toward the glittering path forward. As they embraced their light, they discovered their truth, forged in the fires of fear and illuminated by the strength they had found within. There was nothing that could consume them now. They had not only fought the darkness, they had conquered it. Together, they exited the house of their horrors, stepping into the dawn that awaited outside, a testament to their love and resilience. The future shimmered before them, a blank canvas painted with possibilities. But the journey of their lives was just beginning. This is the moment to support our channel. You need to subscribe now to keep up with our exclusive stories and never miss a beat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and share the love. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this finale. We want to hear from you. Are you ready for what's next? Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this amazing conclusion. It's time to grow this community together.